Ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues and listeners, here we are again, and it's a bi-weekly session that I'm starting to really look forward to now each time. Get to see David Banmiller, 50-year aviation veteran and author of Turbulence, and I hope you're enjoying the chapters as we go through them. And today we're on the 5th session, and it's chapter 4, Inside the Corporate Office. So, David, welcome again, sir. And you're obviously still in lovely Dublin in Malahide. So it's lovely to see you again.
Well, and the sun's out today. Go figure. Last week was, I think we got that winter storm that hit a week ago, and goes across the Atlantic, and then it hits Ireland before it hits anything else. And I mean, it's going to sound crazy to people in the Northeast, but it got to below zero, and we're not used to that.
Yeah.
So it's usually in the 40s and early 50s this time of year. But I go out every day. I don't care what, and we had snow twice.
Yeah. No, it's lovely. And it's such a, I mean, for anybody who's interested, they should look it up on the map and see where it is in Dublin. But you're right on the coast, beautiful harbour there. You got the golf course close, fantastic. Nice rugby club.
Love it. Yep. And we watched the rugby match over the weekend where we were creamed again.
Yeah.
The Frogs beat us. Excuse me, the French.
Yes, yeah, that's it. Yeah, be careful there.
Yeah,
no, they did. They're doing well, but Ireland been unlucky now a couple of times. Right, sir. So inside the corporate office. So what we're talking here now is, and you mentioned in the book, positions of mutual respect for each position. So what you're actually likening it to, is a big team, and you've put that the story of the VP marketing flying in the cockpit is a little example of how people sometimes forget which positions they're in and to focus on their own. So do you want to talk us through that lovely story of what happened with the VP marketing in the cockpit?
Well, I picked that because I have a lot of cockpit stories from, go arounds to emergency landings to chit chat in the cockpit. And I've flown in about 5 or 6 different cockpits. Even before 9/11, of course, after 9/11, it was restricted, but I could still do it as the CEO. And there's some things that are common. And one of the things that's common is when you go into the cockpit, which I really miss, the camaraderie is terrific. You shut the door and it's the inner sanctum. Yeah. And you chat about stuff. And as the CEO, I've always felt a responsibility to do that and to get rid of all the noise and the stuff that is said one way or the other, even in bargaining. During bargaining times, I've always gone in the cockpit and flown around and talked to them about issues. So in this one occasion, which I think typifies some of the character in the cockpit, look, pilots are smart people, but they deal in zeros and ones. And I mentioned that in other places where decision-making is very important. It could be a nanosecond worth of decision-making that saves people's lives or it doesn't. So my respect for these folks is enormous. So there's a tendency amongst a lot of pilots to talk about the CEOs, talk about marketing, particularly. Yeah. I don't want to talk about engines and flying and all. They do all they want to talk about marketing or PR or where are we flying? Why do we fly this place? Why do we charge that? So this one situation, which somebody told me about, it didn't happen to me, but I do believe it. This marketing guy is in the jump seat chatting with the pilot and co-pilot. And the pilot is, let's say, ranting and pontificating about marketing strategies, including pricing. And by the way, those ads on TV should be different. And why are we flying to Des Moines or wherever? And so the marketing guy listens to this for a long time. And then the marketing guy reaches his hand forward to grab the throttles as if to take control of the airplane. And the captain smacks his hand and pulls it back and said, wait a minute, you don't know how to fly. And the marketing guy looks at him and says, and you don't know marketing. It is sort of, it's with no disrespect. It's just, look, we all have our certain proclivities, if you want to use that word, or backgrounds or experiences. We're the product of our own tapes. We grow up, I grew up all across the spectrum of the industry, and I did it on purpose. I wanted to do every job. I figured maybe I wasn't smart enough to be good at everyone. So why don't I be reasonably smart at a lot of them instead of just one. Some people come up in finance, some in marketing, some in ops, and they're a bit typecast. I wanted to do it all. And as a result, I had a lot of experiences with the people end of things, as well as obviously the corporate structure. how it works behind the scenes, what I call behind the curtain.
Yeah.
And that is one example. Another one, if I can quickly add it, is we were flying out of Burbank, and the co-pilot and I were chatting because he and I just got to be friendly. And he said, Dave, anything new going on? They always say, what's the latest? Now, this is when I was with AirCal years ago. And we had, 50 airplanes flying around the West Coast. And I said, can you keep a secret? Dave, can I keep a secret? I said, okay, not outside this cockpit. I'm only going to say one thing, 747s. And he lights up. I said, okay, that's it. And I don't want to hear it again. The following morning briefing at 8:00, I have all these people on, all the stations, the flight ops guys, the maintenance guys. And I get this question from 3 people already saying, I didn't know we were getting 747s. And it wasn't even 24 hours. So the cockpit, there's a word that we used long before me at Aloha, the coconut wireless is what they called it at Aloha.
Yeah.
Where the rumors are spread magnificently. In fact, if you want to place one, like politicians do a lot, right?
Yeah.
Just think of something that you want to either go this way or that way and then plant it. I wasn't much for that, but some people are.
Yeah, no, that's crazy, isn't it? Now, obviously, that story depicts, something that you've said many times in the book about all disciplines are interconnected and how corporate culture has changed over the years, but also that the personal dynamics, and sometimes drama between these divisions, can make or break a company. And you've got a reference, which I thought was lovely, which is where you talk about yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And you put finance into yesterday, and then you put flight ops, engineering, maintenance, ground ops, HR and admin into today. And then into tomorrow, you've got IT and marketing with a bit of IT in today, obviously. So it's a nice way of sort of categorizing who does what within the team and for what reason. So that
what I did was I followed that paradigm, which was in my head for years, and I learned it early on, actually, in my early days with TWA when I was assigned to corporate headquarters, working for a VP, and I was like 25 years old, and I was enamored with the whole thing. But one of the things I learned was marketing and operations were 2 separate divisions reporting to the executive VP. At the time, I think was Blaine Cook. So one year, marketing was the driver. So marketing said, this is what we're going to do. And operations, aka maintenance, stations, had to execute the marketing strategies, which included maybe different interiors. Maintenance had to do all the work to make that happen, et cetera. And then the mood changed. And then all of a sudden, a guy got promoted and he was more operations oriented. So TWA was driven from a marketing point of view. And then they had a finance guy. So I watched these cultures change at the top based upon the pedigree of the guy that was pulling the lever, pushing the throttle, right?
Yeah.
So I took that to heart over the years. And with the companies that I took over, I typically reorganize them. And we've talked about that before, and I enjoy doing it. It's tough, not always nice, but you got to do it. So you have to have something behind you to make those decisions. I called it yesterday, today, and tomorrow.
Yeah,
Okay, let's make it easy. Yesterday is what happened.
Yeah.
Statistics, finance keeps account. The ops meeting today has yesterday's statistics and on time and baggage and that kind of thing. That all happened. Today is what's happening today. And that ops call in the morning is, where's the iron? Where are the maintenance problems? Where are the issues? Where's the weather? Stations, flight ops, maintenance, all of that is happening live.
Yeah.
Then there's tomorrow, because marketing has done its job, right?
Yeah.
Marketing's got to get tomorrow's passenger.
Yeah.
And IT is the bridge, because IT has, over the years, not in the early years, but now, bridges all 3, because IT sort of touches them all. And then the trick is to pick the right people with the right backgrounds, experience, and I guess attitude towards those sort of positions and understanding, and then making sure they all understand in staff meetings and as you execute and talk, hey guys, we're all in this together and here's how it works. Yeah. And that's called teamwork.
But David, I want to ask you something now on a serious and very seriously now, because what you said there, it all makes sense and it's textbook stuff, and it's something that anybody who's played sport, especially physical sport, they can all appreciate, because once you're on the field, doesn't matter what your opinions are or whatever, you're all together, you're fighting for one thing, which is to win, and you're looking after each other, which is a successful team. Now, sometimes you come across people who've got the ego of a 747, but the people skills of an old kite. And they tend, sometimes, depending on who's in charge, they tend to have so much influence in a business and in an organization for an extraordinary long time before they're displaced. And during their reign, shall we say, they manage to ruin so many lives. Good people will leave the company because they know they can. People who can't leave because of opportunities, they get absolutely poisoned and demoralized and deflated. And then when somebody does go, it's almost as if, well, it should have happened earlier, because the poison is so set in now, it's going to take so long. You know, why are those sort of people allowed to continue in organizations for so long?
It's different today. And let me give you some prime examples. And I don't want to get too far into the personalities because, you know, it's just politically, I want to be a little bit cautious here. But let's just take some examples that everybody knows. Yep. I have some private stuff I won't say, but just publicly. Take a Herb Kelleher.
Yep.
Smart as a whip.
Yep.
People person, lawyer by trade. Basically, he and Roland King and one of the guys started Southwest on a cocktail napkin, organizing Austin, Houston, and Dallas, one airplane type, one of the night for all the airplanes, etc. Very charismatic, very charming, fun, maybe a little crazy. I mean, you couldn't get away with that today, although he did for many years. You know, he'd dress up as Elvis, and, you know, he'd start drinking early, but he was just, he always had his head on straight. I love the man. I mean, sorry for his passing, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
And then the other side of that could be a Bob Crandall type, who was extremely tough, also very, very smart, admired the guy. And stories before I got there included Bob would beat everybody up on the annual budgets, and then every quarter you had to go in and talk about your performance and your budgets, and you better know what you're talking about. The story is one guy had a heart attack, you know, in the meeting or being dragged from the meeting. Another one was Bob was talking about cargo security and said the security guards are expensive, so go put in a dog. So they put in a dog, and then the next budget they had the dog there, and Bob said, I don't want to pay for the dog. Why do you have, and the dog food? So take out the dog food and make a recording of a dog barking. That probably happened. In my case, I had to be well honed because I was dealing with Europe, Mexico, Japan, 20 currencies at the time, and opening cities. It was really challenging. But Bob is the kind of guy that demanded excellence. So I don't say that's a bad thing. But there are times when not everybody can handle that style. And then there's a third type that I'm thinking about, a Frank Lorenzo type. Frank's very, very charming, nice guy, good family guy. If you ever met him, and I have a couple times, he interviewed me once to go run New York Air, and I spent some time with the guy, and then he wanted actually to jump in and help finance Pan Am when Carl Icahn was dancing with us. The problem was that the unions hated him. Yeah, he was at the time when they merged Eastern and Texas International, and you know, he did a lot of ruthless things to particularly to the unions and particularly the pilots. And one story was he's sitting down with the pilots in LA, and Frank told me this, so it's not third hand.
Yeah.
Chat with the pilots and said, listen, at midnight, if we don't finally agree after months of negotiation, I'm going to declare bankruptcy and you're going to be out in the wind. They didn't believe him. Frank declared bankruptcy the following morning. And all these guys were out, you know, on the street for, I don't know, some forever. You know, they were marching in you know, with their placards in front of ticket counters for a year or two. I hired some of them, and there was an issue about, you really want to hire these guys? And I said, why not? If they're good pilots, I don't care
where they come from.
So there's all kinds of personalities and types. Even today, today's folks seems to me, are more measured than than they were back then. It's sort of like the 60s and 70s and 80s couldn't be compared to what we have now. And it's not just the cultures and the differences in the marketing, it's also the senior leadership.
Yeah, what I find now, yeah, and I understand that about the leadership. I'm talking about the levels that have got the influence over the top. Okay, so there's always that filtering level in any company where they don't want to pass up all the information and they don't want to pass down all the information, and they try and come to some sort of a happy mix or a politically biased mix for themselves. It's those people that are allowed to stay in those positions that have such terrible effect. And even some executive assistants, they've got a big effect on what happens down on the ground, with the operations. And lots of big companies I work for, the characters are always pretty much the same. And I don't have to be as politically correct as you do, but you know what I'm saying? They're lacking certain things in their life. They're lacking certain things in personality. And they wouldn't be somebody that you'd rush to go out, and spend some time with. And they've got about as much sense of humor as a Faruka. And they tend to have this different type of motivation. And it has such a negative impact on business. I've always, there's some people, obviously I'm not going to mention their names, but I'd like to think they know exactly who they are if they're listening to this. And I just hope that they've had perpetual constipation since those days, because they've had such a bad effect on so many people.
Well, I think as I'm listening to you, my brain is kind of putting this into categories. And let me make some observations. One is insecurity. A lot of folks that have that sort of style, domineering, close to the vest kind of style, aren't true leaders. And they've gotten there for whatever reasons, politics or luck or who knows what. But down deep inside, a lot of those folks don't feel secure. The second one is control of information.
Yeah.
And power. And a lot of people see if you have the information and you keep it close, then you have the power. Now, I don't like those, and I can list people that I have dispatched, fired, because of those attitudes, because I just absolutely will not put up with it, or the politics that I saw at TWA, and I never forgot about it. So I know what you're saying, Chris, and it's out there. Let me say part of it is the human condition.
Yeah.
Been around for 5,000 years. The Egyptians probably had the same thing. In fact, they did. They had second and third level people that weren't the same. And then every airline is a little bit different. The cultures have changed a little bit over the years. United's culture, American's culture, they've merged so many airlines. It's a little bit different. But I don't think airlines have the only situation as you described. I think
no. It's the world over, Dave. It's the world over. And it's people, and the same sort of traits. Those people don't like others doing well, and they don't promote them and wish them good luck. And I think there's nothing better than seeing somebody who thinks they're good become great because of help that they've been given or guidance. Or it's a lovely thing. It's like seeing spring flowers come up. It's I think it's wonderful.
Well, I've often said to people that come in and said, listen, I've been offered a better job and with another company, maybe a competitor. And I said, look, your first obligation is not to me. Your first obligation is to yourself and your family.
Yes.
And then your career. And I'll figure something out. Don't worry about me. But if this is in your best interest, then how can I help you?
Yep.
Why wouldn't you do that? It's common sense. And it's not just leadership. That's why people follow you, because they trust you and know that your best interests are also at stake. And we know that.
Yep.
And we have an obligation as a leader, especially when you get up to the CEO level, to not just talk it, but walk it.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's great. Now, I know that you've mentioned and like having obviously read the book, you're very complimentary about certain individuals that have crossed your path and that you've relied on. And I mentioned about, executive assistants, and they're sometimes unsung heroes because of the length of their hours, complicated schedules. They run a tight ship, and they're also the eyes, the ears, and even the smells on behalf of the top people. And you mentioned Tang, you know, and, you know, the do's and don'ts, and how she explained to you about the cultural sensitivities, you know, when you went to Hawaii. I mean, she stands out as the way you've written about her, and even the way you've referred to her. There's a very, very strong feeling of respect and admiration and gratitude, dare I say, to the lady.
Well, I learned early on in TWA days when Fred Reed, who became president of Delta, a good friend of mine, he and I were working together. I worked for his father many years ago. And his assistant first taught me that the assistant controls the gate. And that was a long time ago, all right? Over the years, with some of the tough jobs, especially at Pan Am, I would have at least 2 secretaries because I was so busy. It's just my style, you know? So I come to Aloha, and here's little Aunt Tang. She couldn't be 100 pounds wet. Lovely lady, 60s, had a liver condition. She was just a charming lady. So I said, Ann, you know, I'm the new guy, and we're going to need 2 of you, but the other person can work for you. And she said, no, you don't understand. I do it all myself. I said, are you sure? She said, absolutely. And she did, alone. She organized my first day. In fact, before my first day, the day before, I got a knock on the door at the Halekulani Hotel here on the beach in Hawaii. It's hard to believe this stuff, right? You actually did it. And Bellman's there with a bunch of shirts, Hawaiian shirts. And he said, the chairman and Tang has sent these to you for your dressing starting tomorrow. I said, okay. Because I had gotten a cheat sheet about what you're supposed to do in Hawaii and say. So first day there, I walked in with my Hawaiian shirt, and there was Ann Tang, and she was always there 7 days a week. She was unbelievable. She organized a secretaries club, and every year I'd buy lunch for all the secretaries of all the airline execs secretaries. And she knew everybody on the planet. I mean, if you wanted to get into the MGM Grand, see Bette Midler, just ask Ann. She knows the secretary of the CEO of the MGM, the CEO of Air France. We got some tickets for some folks, including my soon-to-be wife, first class Air France. She was an employee, and had connections with everybody at every level, regardless of the size of the corporation. And she did it through a network of personal assistants. She would run into traffic for me. I mean, she was just a delightful woman. She would, I got gas once in 4 years. I never went to the laundry or the dry cleaners. Or, you know, she did everything. She'd say, well, what do you want for dinner? Something will be ready, waiting for me to pick up to go home. Or she'll call on a Saturday and say, what would you like to do today?
Yeah.
How can I help you?
And there was a hospital incident.
Well, that was pretty pronounced, you know, as I mentioned in the early part of the book, when I had my brain aneurysm.
Yeah.
It's coming back from seeing the guys at Southwest, and had the brain aneurysm. And the guy at the front desk in my condo complex called the ambulance, probably saved my life. So the ambulance arrives, and I made 2 calls. One was to my doctor, who said, don't take aspirin, because I bled out. And the other was to Ann Tang. And I said, Ann, get the team together and meet me at the emergency room. And the ambulance was right there. And I was just like, really, that's a bad thing to have happen. I'm telling you, talk about headaches. But then they juiced me up, so I was in la la land. So Ann was there. When the ambulance rolled in, they rolled me to the emergency room. There's Ann Tang with me, worried, holding my hand. And behind her were the key vice presidents, the CFO, Thom Nulty, the marketing guy, Mike Kaufman for airports and operations, and Lee Steele for flight ops. They were all there. And I had each one of them given an assignment with Ann coordinating, and also the PR lady, because I said, I don't want anybody to know I'm in the hospital. We were in the middle of negotiating with United Airlines to merge and have United buy Aloha. And our pilots were in Chicago with the Alpha pilots from United, almost striking a deal when this happened. So you couldn't have found me on the register. And Ann coordinated all of that. And we gave each person assignments. I gave my BlackBerry to the CFO, and each person was given assignments, and nobody was to let anybody know that I was even in the hospital.
Yeah.
They'd answer the emails, and coordinated all that stuff. And she was a dear lady right until the end, when we had to go through all those challenges and sell everything off. And she passed away, unfortunately, in an accident at her home just a couple of years ago.
Oh dear.
She's always been in my heart. She's, we'd stay in touch. And she'd call me occasionally when she worked for another company after Aloha. She'd been with Aloha 30 years, or 35 years. And she'd say, can we still have that secretary lunch once a year? I said, yeah, you still have my American Express card. Of course you can. She was just the epitome of that unbelievable assistant that makes your life so much easier. 100% trust, knew everything, kept her cards close to the vest, knew exactly what was going on. I knew everything. I know who was in a mode of indiscretion at the hotel when they were visiting, whether it was this person or that person. I got stories. How do I know them? The chambermaid would tell Ann, who would tell me, just in case you want to know. I knew stuff about people that to this day they have no idea.
It's incredible. I mean, God bless her. It's such a shame that she's not still with us. But I'd love to have met her on one of these sessions that we have, just to say, Anne, you made a huge impression. But it's lovely to see people like that. It's brilliant.
Well, she made whatever success I might have had at Aloha over the trying and challenging years. I mean, she was it. I don't know what I would have done without her.
I can't believe I love Hawaiian shirts. So the only thing she could have done differently with bringing me a batch of shirts, Hawaiian shirts, was to have an Elvis lookalike singing Blue Hawaii or something in the background. But it must have been incredible. What a lovely, lovely time. Now, getting back to how we started with people's understanding and appreciation of what marketing is and how important it is. And, so many people, and this isn't just in aviation, they don't have an appreciation of the impact or the need or the support that good marketing can give to a business plan and a business strategy. And when you think about it, it covers sales, reservations, scheduling, public relations, promotions, advertising, pricing, and industry relations, and probably many other. So it's so important. But as things changed and the dynamics changed, and obviously, you mentioned there's, 60s, 70s, 80s, etc. Not a dinosaur, but a position that, as we all came into the industry, we were so accustomed to, travel agents, they were central players, until the mid to late 90s. And obviously they played an integral role. And also airlines and smart marketing management were able to play and use them, and in some cases abuse them in ways, but being very clever. And they were able to then influence the airline of choice. Now, you had somebody that, again, you speak fondly of, which is Thom Nulty. And he was with Navigant, wasn't it? That he was with?
Yes, Navigant.
Yeah.
Travel service, like 1,000 shops around the country.
Yeah. So, but he was a special person to you as well, wasn't he?
Well, I knew Thom before I knew him. I was at TWA Terminal 3 and he was at American Terminal 4. We didn't know each other. And then he was one of the first supervisors on the 747 flying around the country. And then he was with Continental and American, and he left and started working for a travel agency out of Newport Beach, a small one.
Yep.
Run by a guy named Tommy Jackson, really a unique sort of individual. And I went to see him from time to time. And in the book, I've got a ticket where I had to buy a ticket after many, many years flying free. And Thom sent me a certificate saying paying passenger,
Yeah. Which was very first one that you had, yeah?
Yeah, in all the days, like maybe one in college, I don't know. But we got to be very close. So now I end up in Hawaii, and we'd stayed in touch on and off. And I had given him advice about how to get exposure. And so I said, always return the phone call from the press at 3 o'clock in the afternoon when they got a deadline, because they'll put you in their Rolodex and they'll start calling you. And ended up, he's in USA Today, Wall Street Journal, he's on TV, doing all that. So we became close. Now I'm at Aloha, and marketing was a problem. And I've never heard anybody other than you describe how accurately marketing really is. People think marketing is advertising or promotions. Marketing is everything you said, from scheduling to pricing to promotions, PR. It's all part of the mix of the messaging.
Yep. Yep.
of the product, I guess I'd say. So Thom was retired, living in Newport Beach and having a great old time. And then he ended up working part-time for an outfit out of Chicago that was involved with hotels and looking for something to do. I said, why don't you just run the West Coast for us for marketing? And he came out to interview me. And he loved Hawaii. We went there as a kid, went there with his family. So I said, why don't you stay here? Why don't you just become our marketing guy for everything, all these disciplines? And he'd been working for the Uberoffs, you know, John and Peter Uberoff. Peter Uberoff ran the Olympics back in the 80s. And John developed a huge international consortium of hotel infrastructure. He didn't own the hotels, but they've done very well. And he said, I'd like to do that. And Thom was with me for the 4 years. And when we put together the United deal at the highest levels, he was very close to the COO at the time. He arranged a dinner meeting. So Thom and I had dinner with the COO of United in Chicago. And I took out this, well, it was a tablecloth. And I wrote on the table the entire flight plan, route system structures, and all this stuff. And that's how we got into United at the highest levels. And that was because of Thom. And then he passed away just a short couple of years ago. I had him over here for my 70th birthday party in Malahide. And he passed away a few months later on the jetway, leaving Dulles for the Middle East to give a speech.
Yeah, no, it's terrible, but probably a good way for him to go. But it's an awful thing. And listening to you now talking about, you're talking about the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, but just being so, making reference there to that certificate, which is in the book of the first time, or proposed the first time that you actually bought a full fare. That was March the 2nd, 1980.
Yes.
Here we are coming up to March 2021.
And we're still breathing.
Yeah, no, but not just that, David. It goes so quick, doesn't it? That's 40 years, 41 years nearly. And for me, looking back 41 years ago, it goes like that, So it's so important that everybody enjoys as much of everything as they possibly can, because it does go so quick. And to fill the journey up with lovely memories and, things you're talking about, being in Hawaii, I cannot think of any job that they would offer me at this moment in time in Hawaii that I would say no to. And
the best jobs
are incredible.
The best jobs, of course, are the airline jobs, because there is such a thing called island fever, because you're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And if you're there all the time, there are people that feel a little bit confined because you sun every day. But terrible. I had the best of all worlds, because I could go to the Far East. I had to go to the East Coast, Washington, every 3 months anyhow. We flew to Newport Beach, LA, San Francisco, the Northwest. So I had a lot of mobility.
Yeah.
For some people that don't have that ease of mobility, it might be a little bit more challenging.
Yeah, no, I agree. But it's just I've been to Hawaii many times, and I went there for my honeymoon, which in itself is a long time ago. It was 37 years ago, but I loved it. Still love it now, and I'd go at any drop of a hat. Now, another person that you mentioned, which is a little bit after the time where you're talking about commissions and overrides, and you also got involved in a court case when you were with AirCal in 1987, and that had to stop because American came in to take on AirCal. So that must have been a strange situation, huh?
It was a bit odd and deserves some mention, because at that time, let's call it the mid 80s.
Yep.
American and United and the others put in these computer systems in travel agents. So gone were the days of handwriting tickets. So the strategy was, okay, put our machine into the travel agent and we'll pay for it. And then judging by your performance each year, we will give you an override. So you get 10% plus. If you beat last year, you get another couple of percent, all computerized, right? And the trick was get the computers into the travel agents. Okay, so now they're in there. So what do? If you're looking to go from LA to San Francisco, and I'm going to use that as an example, you could take any city pair in the US.
Yeah.
And you go in there and it's an American system, Sabre, put into travel agency X. What comes up with the first page? American. Not because of time, not because of price, because it's American.
Yep.
That was number one. Number two was if they booked you instead of American, you would pay a higher fee per booking than American paid with the travel agents. So you can see these two issues
Yeah.
are theoretically antitrust, and then United did the same thing, Delta did the same thing. So it was common. So a bunch of us smaller players got together, not illegally, because some things you can't do. But in terms of this principle, guys like Alaska, us, Use Air West, PSA, we were all nailed. So we took it to court. And AirCal did its own court case, hired lawyers. American, under Bob, who I remember at one point, I won't give you all the details, but he was into some issue with Northwest, and he and I, the chief legal counsel, were in a room, and he said, I want you to hire the toughest, meanest lawyer and get to. Anyhow, what he's hired mock juries, in cases. So in this case, what other companies can do is they'll kill you with paperwork and expense.
Yep.
So they will make you deliver files and disclosure of everything for 10 years and just wear you down on legal bills. We're in the middle of that. Simultaneously, I'm saying, well, we need to get a marketing agreement with somebody. So we're talking to everybody. I mean, knock on everybody's doors. We knocked on American's door, and Thom Plask was the executive VP marketing. And Thom and I met privately in a little hotel room in Boise, Idaho, so that nobody would know we were even talking.
Boise, Idaho. Yeah.
And so we put together a deal that was marketing plan, did that for 6 months, and then Crandall liked us so much by then that he said, well, I'm just going to buy you. So he brought the two owners down on a Friday, and late in the year, 86, and said, I like what I say, I'm going to buy you. We were trading at $8 a share, publicly traded company. And Bob offered $15 a share, but you got to do it over the weekend and before the market opens on Monday. So General Line calls me and says, this is what's going on. We sort of saw it coming, but we didn't really expect that. And they were pleased because I think particularly George Argyros, the other owner, was getting kind of, what I said, frustrated with the expense of buying an engine for $5 million. And he's building all these condos, apartments and stuff. And one engine, $5 million? I said, yeah, especially if it works, if it doesn't, you got a problem. And so I remember Roger Dangerfield once said, he was talking to somebody, said, the passenger said, hey, we just lost an engine. And Rodney Dangerfield said, don't worry, they'll find it. But George didn't understand the economics. So anyhow, they reached a deal in principle, board meeting over the weekend, 2 board meetings, to make sure that we all showed due diligence because we had a bunch of shareholders. They were the dominant.
Yeah.
But you can't make it look like an inside job. So we had the board meetings over the weekend. And one of the issues that came up was that litigation, because it was active. And American said you have to drop the litigation.
Yeah, of course.
So I'm on the board. So the board members were doing it telephonically, said, well, Dave, what should we do? I said, well, we don't have a choice.
Yeah.
We can't be suing the company that's buying us. Seems unlikely.
Yeah.
So we'll take action to get rid of the lawsuit. And then the next question, a couple hours later, was, by the way, you're also suing United for the same issue. And I said, correct. We'll cancel that one too. That's that story. And one of the board members was actually at a Rams football game, and he was on the phone during the board meeting. And George Argyros, actually, the co-chairman, and he hangs up. Most of the discussions are over. Lady gets behind him, gets on the phone. She's in the board meeting because the connection didn't disconnect. So he's listening to our board meeting. And General Line was all aghast. I mean, it was a hilarious situation. Anyhow, that's that story, and it's an interesting legal aspect of an acquisition.
It is, isn't it? And so close to the wire. Now, another person, so this is like a Hall of Fame. You mentioned Mike Gunn of American.
Yeah, Mike was came up in the sales. He was Southern California, and he was born and raised, I guess, in Southern California. Good guy, and he came up the sales, and he became sales manager and then sales VP, and then he ended up as the top marketing guy. Now, Thom Plaskett was above him, between him and Crandall, when the frequent flyer program came in. And it was actually Tom Plaskett and Crandall, and probably more Tom Plaskett, who thought about the green stamp days of after buying stuff at food marts. And so Tom and Crandall come up with the frequent flyer program. And then Tom left to go run Pan Am, and Mike became the top guy and for all of the marketing, and really did a good job.
Yeah, no, and you love marketing yourself, and it was, again, you mentioned in the book Bill Lyon asked you while you were studying for your MBA, and that's when you used the term in the book, never say no to an opportunity, because even if you're not prepared or you're not fully sure yourself, it's a learning experience, and it's one that you should always push yourself to try.
Well, General Lyon took me out to lunch at his country club in Newport Beach, and I was running stations, reservations, operations. And the fellow that was running marketing came from United, and he really wasn't doing a good job. He's a nice guy, but he was a United big company kind of guy.
Yeah.
And General Lyon and George Rogers kept saying, well, why aren't we flying between LA and San Francisco? And he would go on about, well, here's what's happening in Mexico and this thing and that thing and the valuation of the dollar, all these esoteric academic things. You go up on the board and do an equation and calculus. And these guys are real estate developers, and they're looking at saying, what? What's the biggest single city pair on the West Coast?
Yeah.
LA, San Francisco.
Yeah.
Why are we flying LA, San Francisco?
Yeah.
Bill was a pretty common sense sort of guy and really smart guy. So they said goodbye to Harry, and he took me out to lunch, and he said, I think we'd like to make you marketing VP. And I said, Bill, I'm an ops guy. I took one course in graduate school in advertising, and that's it. And he said, Dave, marketing is common sense. That's it. And I thought about that, and I said, well, you got to listen to the general, right? And he's also the chairman, and he's also a good guy, and he believes in me. So I'll give it a whack. And I did. And in fact, I loved it.
Yeah.
And it probably helped me get promoted to president, because we were never making our targets. Every month and every quarter, we come out, and the past marketing guy would come out with these statistical forecasts on load factors and yields and traffic and that kind of thing. And he never made them.
Yeah.
So literally my first week on the job, I sat down with a really, really smart guy that was tumbling the numbers. And I said, listen, let me see the numbers. We went by city pair. And I said, knock them by 10%. I don't care what you think. 10%, 15%. We're going to run all these different numbers a different way. We made the numbers every month and every quarter. This guy, this is a smart guy. I wasn't that smart. It's just common sense. And then we also fired the ad agency. The ad agency at the time had a 30-second commercial with a guy playing a piano saying, we have style.
Yeah.
Dancing around. We said, well, okay, that's interesting, but nobody cares.
Yeah.
And so we came up with two strategies. We fired them and hired a more aggressive ad agency. I did. And we put forward two things. The first one was price.
Yep.
$19, $9.99. We had a promotion when we put the MD-80 into Burbank for $9.80, goes an MD-9-80. We had people lined up down the street on a Saturday morning in Burbank to buy our tickets. Yeah. And we were on TV free. So we did that, and then we also come up with the 800 4-air cal number.
And yeah, so, I thought that was lovely. We said for air cal. I think
just call us. And by the way, if we can't book you, we'll book you on PSA. We'll book you on the competition. Just give us the first chance, and if we can't, we'll book you on the other guy. Well, let me tell you, those two things worked. Turned around the company, actually.
Yeah, no, I think, and people underestimate the value of smarts. And sometimes, you can do something like that. And then you also mentioned a couple of others, like the De Beers example of a diamond is forever. And back in the 60s, when Volkswagen brought the Beetle in, and their tag was think small. And things like that live with people for such a long time.
In the States, we had Charmin, which was selling, of all things, toilet paper. But they had this guy on there that represented how soft it was. This sounds kind of ludicrous, but it worked. And in those days, that the drill was to get top of the mind awareness. Is really what we call it in marketing, right? Coca-Cola was ingenious at that.
Yeah.
because they wanted to have what they called institutional advertising. So you saw Coke everywhere. You might see it on a billboard. You might see it in a TV ad. You might see it in a newspaper. You might see it in a magazine. But it's a continual reinforcement of Coca-Cola.
Yep.
And what we did rolling advertising. It's a little bit different these days because of technology and the internet and Twitter and Facebook and so on. But we had maybe 100 flights a day out of Southern California. So we could afford TV and radio and print and billboard. And we rotated them. So one week we'd be heavy TV, then we'd move to radio, and then print and magazines, and rotating back and forth. It was what I used to call wave advertising, because you hit some people, then other people. After a while, it gets in their brains, sort of like institutional advertising.
Yeah.
And it was effective. That's one of the things that I actually did pick up in graduate school.
Yeah, yeah. And you also mentioned as well something that I thought was very clever, which was to do with Virgin. And it was back in the like the love story, the Reagan Thatcher days. And there was a reference to Winston Churchill. And the question was, what airline would Winston fly? And when he goes like that with the V sign for Virgin, I thought that was absolutely superb.
Yeah, classic Branson, huh?
Yeah, that was very clever. And then on the other side, somebody who's outrageously funny, Peter Sellers, but the way that was done probably annoyed more people than it did made them laugh and associate with the product.
Well, it was focused on the foreign accent service with TWA. Yeah. So we, the company, not me, I was in operations at the time, come up with this idea of having uniforms.
Yeah.
For four cultures. So you had the French, the Italians, the English, and the Americans. So the American chic was New York chic, and then the toga for Italy, and then if you were a barmaid in London, you had kind of a barmaid sort of outfit, like the old Gore Hotel in London. Yeah. And so that's what they did. And I think I mentioned earlier, the problem is nobody checked when they issued them that they weren't fire retardant. So the FAA shut it all down. But in the meantime, Peter Sellers is on these marketing commercials. You could get it on YouTube.
Yeah.
Where he was talking about the foreign accent. So he talked about the Italians and the Italians got upset in New York because they thought it was an ethnic slur.
Yeah, yeah.
Which I guess you could argue, but at the time it was totally hilarious.
Yeah.
But TWA paid him $1 million, positive first class, maybe forever. But we took it off because it's so offensive, it couldn't deal with all the flack.
And he was the chief of the foreign accent service.
Yep. He was the guy, he was the front man, he was the promo guy, he was the face of the
That was amazing. Amazing. And then you also talk about the changes in focus, through the 50s, the 60s, the 70s. And then that's where Mary Wells comes into the frame, who was the inspiration for Peggy off Mad Men. And she must have been, she's obviously way ahead of her time, but the influence she had was phenomenal, huh?
Amazing. And she got together with a very famous designer and said, we need to change the look of Braniff.
Yeah.
And Braniff was flying to South America and Mexico. And she said, we got to get some of these more exotic cultural colors, if you know what I mean. Yeah. So she changed it all out. She had models on airplanes. She had all new uniforms. And some of it was associated with the James Bond movies. And she got, a little bit carried away. You could never put it on television today. Some of the stuff that they put on television back then, I'm not even sure I want to say it, but back then it worked. And I think it was Hardy Lawrence, who was her husband, I believe, said,
Braniff, yeah.
He said, if you didn't know about Braniff's style and commercials and its look, you were living on another planet.
That's right.
Because they had it everywhere. And it stuck in everybody's minds. But the culture of today would never have let that happen.
I know it's incredible out there. There's one, obviously, the one where it goes coffee, tea, or it's that. When you look back now, like we were talking about 40 years or 30 years or 20 years, you look back and you think, my goodness me, what were people thinking? But the way of thinking then was so different, so it's just like history, things change, you learn from it, and then you move forward, and then you influence the future. But it was amazing what went on back then.
When you think about, and this is going to be a little bit political, I'm going to try to stay in the middle, but the craze about statues
Yeah.
around the world, I mean, not
Yeah.
just in the
Yeah.
United States, and Civil War in the North and the South, and then
Yeah.
the British and slavery and all that, right? And
Yeah.
even Winston Churchill and now Lincoln. I mean, it's just, where do you stop it?
Yeah.
And people need to understand, from my vantage point, is you learn about the future based upon what you know of the past. You're not legitimizing the past.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can't change it anyhow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some of this stuff's been going on for 5,000 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what you need to do is educate people based upon those experiences versus today versus tomorrow.
Yeah.
And somebody in England come up with this interesting idea, which I thought might cut right down the middle. Say, look, okay, let's not tear down Winston Churchill. I mean, it's not World War II was one. Maybe he did some things that maybe today wouldn't be as politically correct, but he did a lot for England. But let's leave it up. But let's put some markings on it, or a plaque or something that talks about the issues a little bit more. Don't tear down the statue. Don't be pay, because the people that do that lose their own credibility, and they lose the argument about what they're trying to argue about, because they should be arguing about, okay, we can learn from that. What are we going to do for the future? Learning from the past, and teach our kids about the future based upon the good things that happened in the past and the not so good things that happened in the past.
Yeah, no, 100%, David. And we are where we are today because of what people did yesterday. And we've got the chance to influence what people will do tomorrow. And that's the way it should always be, always moving forward, being positive about things. And I seen something on LinkedIn this morning, and it was a sign that says what I learned at school, and it had something like the 8 times table and where certain countries were, and what I wished I learned at school, and it was things like, wellness and well-being, basic finances, being nice to people. It was a different concept, and that's the way it is now as well. And everything changes. But something else that was crazy then, which they spoke about, the Pucci galores, Emilio Pucci with the modern uniforms, and things that were so different, and the way the designs were done inside the aircraft, everything that we have now today. And you look at, something like the Etihad suite, and then you've got the Qatar, the Q suites. They are phenomenal.
Yeah.
Why would anybody who had the money not want to travel in such luxury? And it's incredible.
Yeah, especially on the 380. I think Etihad is keeping the 380s, which allowed for that kind of glamour, I suppose, because of the space that they have to do it. I've flown on British up on the 380, which they did a great job at. Nothing like those private sealed off suites.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. Now, just as we're getting near the end now, we're coming across the frequent flyer program. You mentioned about the the green stamps. We've already covered that, but also the value of the frequent flyer club. In some cases, which is phenomenal, it's worth more than an airline.
Well, what happened originally was to build loyalty. If you buy on American, and it really worked, versus United or Delta, take the big ones in Northwest, and you got points. And at some point in time, you could use those points, and it's evolved over the years, to upgrade, to get a free ticket. And you run the math and you multiply it out, and sometimes it's a good idea, sometimes it isn't. But then the next phase was the credit card.
Yep.
Okay, American Airlines credit card with Citi and MasterCard. So then when you bought other stuff, not just a ticket, but now all these other things, you still got points. So then the credit card company, in concert with the airline, goes out and cuts these deals with vendors like hotels and car companies, for obvious examples. But now it's everything. It's unbelievable stuff you can buy, right? Or pay for. I think you can even pay for your phone bill or electricity. And there's an economic equation. So many cents per mile. And so the airline gets the person to fly on them. The guy uses the credit card. It's usually 2 to 3% that goes to the credit card company. Then there's this other person called a hotel that accepts it. and let's say you use points for the Hilton.
Yep.
Well, Hilton's giving you a room. So who pays for the room?
Yep.
Well, American owes Hilton a couple of cents per mile or however and it's moved around. I mean, when I was with Aloha, we were co-chair partners with United. So every month I'd get a report. How many people use our miles to fly on United? How many people vice versa on AirCal or on Aloha? And then every month you balance the equation. It's a business.
Yep.
Air Canada a few years ago sold it for a couple $100 million. And I believe in this latest post-COVID financing challenge, Doug Parker may have leveraged American's frequent flyer program, which is worth an enormous amount of money.
I think before COVID, it was $1 billion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a whole, they have a president of the American's credit card business has its own president.
Yeah. It's phenomenal. Now, a couple of statements you said, and especially in this particular section that we're covering, and one of them you said that you always like to hire the best and brightest who believe in teamwork, and then you get out of their way and you let them move forward. And another statement that you said, which I really liked, was you did not want to be the smartest person in the room, just the one passing the baton and leading the orchestra of talent. I thought that's a really nice thing. So it shows humanity, humility, and you're recognizing that, all good people have got great teams around them.
When I got to Aloha, we had 23 or 24 vice presidents. We didn't need that many vice presidents.
Yeah.
And assistant vice presidents. I always hated the word assistant. What's an assistant vice president or assistant manager? Either are or aren't. In any case, in a couple of months, I knocked it down to 12.
Yeah.
And 10 of the 12 I replaced in the first 6 months. And I brought in mostly a new team that had my vision in trauma, okay, including the Thom Nultys of this world.
Yeah.
And I hired what I found in their disciplines, the best and the brightest, and I let them do what they do. And we invited a guy to help us with the liaison with United Airlines, who used to run their frequent flyer program at United. And I invited him to a couple of our staff meetings, our weekly staff meetings, all the senior officers. And he told me separately, said, your team could walk into United Airlines and run it better. He said, I've never seen such a team and such camaraderie and such discipline as you've got with these folks. And I always said, and I executed it, I didn't just say it, I want the best and the brightest. I want them smarter than me. I just want the baton. I just want to be the guy to organize the team and then let them do what they do. And I remember there was one of our guys who was head of maintenance was on his iPhone in a staff meeting. And I said, hey, John, we're in the middle of something here. Maybe you want to join us. And let me look at your business card versus mine, because I think mine is a little bit higher than yours. So you don't have to yell. You get things. He got the message. The next staff meeting, when you walked in, I don't have it around here now. Everybody had my face on. They got a lollipop with my face indented on a cardboard cutout, and everybody sat there with my picture as their face.
Made an impact.
That was teamwork.
Made an impact. Yeah. And I think on that impact, and it goes without saying, and the book, I love it, and I'm getting into it again as we go through it together. Fair play to you. And it's lovely that you're able to reflect on such a wonderful career, wonderful experiences, and to remember it so vividly. It's brilliant, Dave. Honestly, I take my hat off to you. And as the orchestra leader of talent, I think that's a great saying and a great way to finish. So the next session will be part 2, which is infrastructure. And we'll be talking about chapter 5, moving the iron. So I'm looking forward to that in a couple of weeks' time. And to you, sir, stay safe. And as soon as you can get back into Gibney's, please take a picture and send it to me, because I can't wait to get there.
It's going to be a while, but I'll be thinking about you.
Yeah, please do. All right.
Thanks.
God bless. Take care. See you in a couple of weeks.